Hello, hello, hello. This is Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator, coming to you on a Tuesday afternoon. Just glad to see everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. Now that the teachers you have going back into your classrooms, my big word: pace yourselves. Pace yourselves. You can't get everything done in 1 week. You can't get everything done in one day. You can't get everything done in 1 month. Okay, pace yourselves. Pace yourselves, and as you pace yourself, you also pace the timeline of your classroom. You give the children a lot time to breathe, and and to engulf and to accept whatever you're teaching. So that helps you out. So I'm here today. I got my little Harrison T-shirt on. That's my alma mater, Harrison High School in Chicago. That's now a grammar school. Well, we'll talk about that later on. But Aurelia Davis, the educator's educator. If this is your first time coming to me and seeing me, I'm just so glad to have you on. Coming to you with just different topics daily, and just sort of teaching myself and then giving my opinion about some things that I have run across, or the newer words. I retired in 2012 from teaching. So a lot of new educational words are in place, and I'm opening up my mindset so that I understand what they mean. And what I'm finding out is that a lot of the times that these particular words like equity and rigor and things like that, those were things we were doing before. You just had a different title and a different name. Well, that's okay. No problem. My background consists of me being a teacher for Chicago Public Schools for over 30 years. What brought me into this particular platform as far as talking to teachers now on a daily basis or time to time, I wanted to continue to share my expertise. I wanted to continue to share my platform as far as mentoring and coaching teachers, which my master's degree is in. I'm a teacher, I have a master's degree in teacher leadership. And I just believe that continual resource and support mechanism is needed outside of the classroom. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. If you would like to learn a little bit more about me, go over to my website, aureliadavis.com. It gives you a little bit more information about some of the things I can do, or some of the things I can help you with, and I welcome anybody and everybody. Well, today we're talking about equity in the classroom, equity throughout the United States, and that particular word, which means freedom to be who you are, has just run into a couple of bumps along the road. Back in the 60s, we were talking about the civil rights. We remember Ruby Bridges, who was not allowed to go into a all white school. How we had to integrate schools, and that was the big thing through the civil rights area. We had to integrate schools so that all children, no matter what color they were able to get the proper education, or the education that they were due. And so equity brings this back. And here we are in 2020, in the 2021, 22, we're still talking about the same thing, because it still has a tendency of raising its ugly head as to, you know, uh, of the particular things that are needed to bring a level playing field for every child is not being met. It's not being met. My title was about, like I said before, I have subscribed to Education Today, and that's a magazine that comes out. It sort of gives you a little update on everything that's going on. And my topic today was gearing up, and I was talking about Kentucky launches an initiative to coach schools on equity. So you ask yourself, why should that happen? Well, like I said before, it's still not happening. It's still not happening. There's a tendency of people not judging particular schools, whether they be in an urban area or rural areas, suburbs, neighborhood schools, and so on and so forth. There's still an imbalance of everything that's going on, and it should not be that way. It should not be that way. So it says the starting this fall, 74 of the states, talking about Kentucky now, more than 170 districts will receive coaching over the next 2 years through Engage to Learn. I guess that's a particular program that goes out and do these workshops. An organization that offers personalized professional development, Typically, DEI training is offered at the district level, but they felt that it was necessary for them to go into the schools and do one-on-one with educators, with educators. The initiative is set to get underway, even though the state's legislator, listen to this, recently passed a law that could potentially restrict conversations about race and racism in the classrooms. This is just like the 1950s all over again, the 1960s all over again. And what I feel, I'm just going to give it out. They don't want to really go back to see how the country failed particular groups, Slavery is real. It happened. It did not go away until the Emancipation Proclamation. It happened. I had ancestors that were enslaved. So don't think it's a fiction, something fictional. It's real. It's real. So what's happening within certain states, they don't want it to be talked about because it makes them look bad. Let's just put it out there. It makes them look bad. It makes people look bad. But the educators and administrators say it remains to be seen whether the new law will affect the state's pioneering coaching efforts. So the new program grows out of an anti-racism resolution passed by the Education Department in 2020. It says that Kentucky's public schools have a history of racial inequity and that people of color are often left out of the conversation and remain unheard. People of color are often left out of the conversation and remained unheard. Since then, the department has offered a range of tools to help districts and educators continue fostering equity in schools. The ultimate goal is for us to have more equity-minded, equity-literate teachers. And I grew up during the civil rights era. I grew up during Dr. King's era. I was alive when Dr. King got killed. And I remember my high school, us fighting for African American history. Simple as that, African American history. And at that particular time, now that I think about it, it wasn't really fair, but we were at the mindset where we wanted it now. We want it now. We want it now. It's long overdue. And so what happened is that there was an upset to the point where they were going to give us African American history, but they were going to give us somebody that was not African American to teach it. And we really were not having that. We weren't, as students in Chicago, we were not having that. Or at my particular school, we were not having it. That my school was very diverse, had a lot of cultures at the time, and had been that way for quite a while in Chicago, And then, of course, there were other areas where where schools were totally African American, totally Hispanic, or totally white. But at our particular school, we demanded to have African American history as a course. Now, they would not give it to us as a course to help us graduate, but it would be a course that we can take along with some other courses. So it was more of an elective. We fought for that and did get it. And the other thing, as I started to teach in like the 80s, what I found out and what we demanded is that we recognize Black History Month, which was February. And so what would happen is that we as a group, or we as a community of teachers in my school where I was teaching, we would come together and we would celebrate Black History Month, which is February. And we would, we went from Black History Week to Black History Month. And we would have all kinds of activities going on in the building. But what we were destined to do is to let the children of that particular school know the contributions of African Americans, which are numerous, okay? From the light bulb, numerous contributions of African Americans. And so we were demanding that those things be done. And we were able to do that. So at that particular time, Chicago Board of Education, and I don't know if it's still in place now. I think it still might be in place, but the principals had to report to the districts about any and every African American celebrations that they were having during the month of February. So my principal, a beautiful person, she allowed the teachers within the building to just put together programs, and we did. I spearheaded a lot of things. You know, I had when they made Dr. King's birthday holiday, I would go down to the office and just, you know, we would just do speeches in the morning, you know, children just saying different things about Dr. King or whatever. So we were well versed in everybody's culture. And we not only celebrated African American cultures, but we celebrated Hispanic, and we just recognized everybody in the building. That was equity. That was equity. And we're talking about this happening in like the 80s and early into the 90s, all the way into the 90s, coming into the 2000s. And the powers that be did not bother us because we were doing a good service to the students that attended that particular school. And so it was needed, it was well received, and it happened. So let's come to 2022. What does equity look like in your classroom? My issue that I sometimes have is that, unfortunately, teachers that are coming into an urban setting to teach have no idea what it looks like. I'll say that again. Teachers that may be coming from another environment, who did not grow up in an urban environment, and coming into a urban environment to teach, a lot of times they do not know what to expect. They do not know what it looks like. And what ends up happening is that they make presumptions on things as to children and what children should do, what children should have, what families should have, what kind of support the students have, and so on and so forth. And when they find that these things are not in place, they have a tendency of blaming the children, but it's not their fault. It's not their fault. When I was mentoring with a particular organization at one time, and most of my teachers that I was mentoring were not African Americans, and some of them were not Hispanic, but it was their first time encountering a school with African American children. And I remember one particular teacher at the time. She showed me her frustration. And the thing about it, I had an open mind as that they were not only teaching, but they needed to be taught also. So I remember a conversation very vividly with one young lady who had grown up. I think she grew up in Texas or somewhere, but she didn't know Chicago. She did not know what Chicago looked like, you know, but that's what this particular organization would do. They would recruit teachers from outside of the city where they were going to work. So I did a one-on-one conference with her, and I told her, I said, just put all of your frustrations out on the table. Put all of your frustrations out on the table. And she told me about how the children were coming in and they hadn't, you know, slept the night before, or they didn't have breakfast, or their clothes were dirty, or they had an odor. And then the parents coming in and just dropping them off and not having any kind of a conversation with her, so on and so forth and whatever. And I said, so you really don't know what this particular neighborhood looks like. You didn't have a clue before you started teaching. And she told me, no. So I told her, I said, well, you know what? I cannot teach you everything that you're going to run into, but what I can tell you is that you don't take anything for granted. I'll say that again. You don't take anything for granted. I had to get to that particular point with my children in my classroom, you know, because I had a variety of students. I had about 15 different cultures in my classroom. And even though those cultures may have been more, what you say, children of African descent or African American descent. I could not measure a child that was born in America that was African American and then a child that was born in Nigeria. I couldn't put them all together. It never would work. It never would work. So I went back to this particular teacher and I told her, I said, you know what? I said, you have to reassess your classroom. That means you have to go back and take each individual child. And it may mean where you have to get on the telephone and talk to the parents and find out what type of environment the children are coming from, because her other problem was that the children were not learning or were not receptive to what she was teaching. I said, then you have to also figure out in your lesson plan if you are meeting them where they are. Are you meeting them where they are? Are you starting at letter C and they need to be starting at letter A? You have to take that into consideration, because if you're teaching a child about pets and that child doesn't have a pet or cannot have a pet in his house, then you have to redirect that situation. So for the children that do, if you had a pet, what would you do? So after we talked, and then what I did is I continued to mentor her on a regular basis. And we came to, she was able to talk to some of the parents and come to, some conclusions. And then those questions that she did have for me, I was able to answer them. I said, okay, sometimes you have, she was talking about a little boy that was being raised by his grandmother. And I said, yes, you have a lot of blended families. I said, it might be the type of situation where the mother was too young to take care of the child. And so you have these grandparents that are picking up the pace. And you may have to be aware that these grandparents may not have had the education in order to help the child at home. Okay, so you don't assume that the grandparent graduated from high school. You don't assume that there's a grandfather. You don't even assume that there's a male in the household, because a lot of these homes are female ran or, female controlled, not controlled, but ran. The females are in place. And I said, there may be an uncle, there may be an aunt, there may be two other cousins from another side. So the household itself is a community where that child has to work within, and you have to work within that community and recognize that community where that child lives. So what I did do is I was able to, she showed me her lesson plans. I have to talk about that in a few minutes. She showed me her lesson plans, and I told her how to redirect her lessons to meet the needs of her children, the children that she had in front of her. And so we worked on that for a couple of weeks. It was like an audit, which I have lesson plan audits. Okay, and my website, I'll talk about that later. But in the meantime, I was able to redirect her and let her know exactly what she needed to change. And it didn't mean that you had to just throw out what you had. That means you had to basically add some things in there so you were meeting the needs of those particular children in front of you. And I told her also, I said, even though you have 15 children, those are 15 different lifestyles those children have. There may be that one little girl that has all of the components of a good family life, and not good family life, of a family life: mother, father, sisters, brothers. Parents are educated. They can help her with her homework and that type of thing. And then you may have that other household where the child is sleeping on the couch or sleeping on the floor. You don't take anything for granted. So I said that to say all of this. In the next couple of days, I have really gotten into this equity situation. And what I did find out, what equity means in the classroom, let me just pull it back up real quick. It says, what is important of equity in education is best formed. In its best form, equity will recognize each student at a truly granular level. While the school system itself will provide a framework and support network, this allows the teacher to recognize the individual needs of each student and present them with an educational process that allows for their success. So you're looking at each child to have his own success within that particular classroom. And that success may not necessarily meet your lesson plans, but if you can take him from point A to point B, from point A to point B, then what you need to do is set your lesson plans up so those things are being met. Now, If you are one of those teachers, what I would suggest most of the teachers do, look at the what you have in your classroom. Look at the how you are approaching equity. Look at how you're approaching equity. You have to be to the point where you are meeting the needs of different children in your classroom. And you don't just skirt over anything. You have to recognize, first of all, more than anything else, equity at one time was, we basically was talking about cultures, but now we're talking about a little bit of everything. And of course, the label of children with IEPs and disabilities, of course, falls in that. That has been in place all the time. But now we're even approaching more cultural situations, and then children that have gender changes and things like that. It's a little bit of everything. And you, as that educator, have to be sure that you meet those goals and meet those needs of those particular children. So I would suggest you first look at your lesson plan. It's like the definition stated is that the goals for set by the district and the goals set for the state are going to remain the same. What you have to do is make a difference in your classroom. You have to make a difference in your classroom. And what you have to do is reevaluate those students that are sitting in front of you, be it preschool all the way to high school, and make sure that you are addressing their needs or giving them credit for who they are, celebrating who they are, so on and so forth. I'm going to give a perfect example about a lesson that I did one time when I was teaching at a school in North Lawndale. And what happened is that I think it was at the time when there was going to be a rocket launch. And I was taking and tutoring about 5 kindergartners, tutoring about 5 kindergartners. And this is, I can't recall the immediate name, but this was the rocket launch that failed. And, those astronauts died. Well, I turned around and the book that the children were working out of, we were doing a test. And what happened is that it was some sequence. It was a sequence in place. And I may have told this before, I'm going to tell it again. There was a sequence. There was a picture of a rocket. There was a picture of the rocket with fire coming out of it. And then there were 2 pictures that showed the rocket launching into the sky and then the rocket falling onto its side. Well, I told the children, we talked about the first 2 pictures. I said, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And so one little boy, and I had about 5 children in that classroom. 4 out of the 5 chose that the rocket was going to land on its side. And so I took the time to talk about this particular issue. And the children said, well, that rocket, what happened on the television, that rocket it blew away. It blew off. In other words, it exploded. And I had to meet them where they were because this was what they saw and this is what they remembered. So this is what they had. So that meant they hadn't witnessed any other rocket launches in the United States, and it may have been because they didn't have a television or were not exposed. So I had to go back and teach all over again as to what sequence looks like and what is supposed to happen and what may not, what is not supposed to happen. So I had to go back into my lessons and I had to delve into and reevaluate. And what I did is I took each individual child and I interviewed them. I said, oh, do you have your own room at your house? Okay. How many people do you live with? And I wasn't questioning it to make them feel bad. I celebrated everything that they told me because I had to make them feel special and say that it was okay for them to be in that particular environment. And once I did that, then what I did is I had to go back and reinvent my lessons for that particular group of children. The good thing about it is that I only had 5. So I was able to teach them individually and bring them all up to maybe one particular level because they were all at various different levels within as far as learning is concerned. And I said that to say this, that every once in a while, those lessons that we have toiled over and redid and redid and redid, and it worked last year, so I'm going to use it again this year. Don't take it for granted that it's going to work. You're going to have to turn around and look at those. So let me tell you about this. I have a program on my website called Lesson Plan Audit. If you feel that you need some consulting or would like for me to look at your lesson plan, I want you to go over to AureliaDavis.com. I want you to click on the Work With Me tab and book a session. I'll say it again. Go to AureliaDavis.com, click on the Work With Me tab and book a session. And we can, just by looking at that lesson plan, by you booking a session with me, I can look at your lesson plan to see if you have equity, if equity exists. And it does not mean that you have to redo the whole lesson plan. But what I might also ask you is, what kind of students do you have in your room? What's your population, cultural population of your classroom? And how are you meeting those different cultural populations in your classroom? Are you working in an urban setting? Are you working in the suburbs, where there's a lot more money for a lot more students, or are you working in a urban setting where there may be poverty, there may be families that are not connected? All of those things have to be taken into place. So I'm going to be talking about some equity, some more things. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about 8 approaches to make sure, powerful ways to promote equity in your classroom. 8 powerful ways to promote equity in your classroom. And you'll be surprised as to how many that word equity goes in so many different areas. It surprised me, as I did my research. But take the time to just sort of evaluate. And if you feel that you're really not meeting the needs of the students that you have in front of you, go to my website, AureliaDavis.com, click on the Work With Me tab and book a session. And I'd love to talk to you. This is all for today. Hope to see you tomorrow. Take care and have a great day. Keep teaching. Bye-bye.